This video was made for grade 12 English home language students within the South African Independent Examinations Board curriculum. Shakespeare's play The Tempest is prescribed for study in 2021, 22 and 23. This video is the second in the series. Here you will get a synopsis of Act 1, Scene 1 and some brief comments and notes on this scene. Act 1 introduces us to most of the important characters in the play, though we learn much more about some than others. In the first scene, we catch a glimpse of the members of Alonso's court amidst the chaos of the storm. But this short, highly dramatic scene is more like a prologue to the main action, all of which takes place on the island. And it is only on the island, in Scene 2, that we become fully acquainted with the play's characters. My students have got this knowledge organizer in the front of their notebooks. This video is a more detailed summary of Act 1, Scene 1, and it introduces the characters of Alonso and Ferdinand and Antonio and Sebastian. You will remember that the first act of a Shakespearean play provides the audience with the exposition. We are shown the setting and introduced to the characters. In this first scene, the setting is given as on a ship at sea. The stage directions let us know that there is the tempestuous noise of thunder and lightning. This scene is a reference to the literal storm, The Tempest, which is the title of the play. The first characters we meet are the boatswain and the shipmaster. Please note the pronunciation here. The word might look like boatswain, but is pronounced boatswain. The boatswain's job is the general running of the ship, and he reports to the captain or the shipmaster. The passengers on board this ship include Alonso, the King of Naples, and Antonio, the bogus or fake Duke of Milan. Ferdinand, the son of Alonso, the King of Naples, Gonzalo, an honest old councillor, and others. From this very first scene, they will display characteristics that hint at their behavior in future scenes. Sebastian and Antonio come across as arrogant and resentful of the authority of the boatswain and the ship's crew over them. They seem to be aggressive and self-serving. Gonzalo comes across as a wise middleman, the one who tries to keep the peace. We start in the thick of the action. The mariners address their passengers, Alonso, Antonio, and Gonzalo, to get out of the way to allow them to do their work of keeping the ship safe. A key exchange is that between the boatswain and Gonzalo. The boatswain challenges Gonzalo, asking him whether he has the authority to stop the storm. He says, "Use your authority. If you cannot, give thanks that you have lived so long and make yourself ready in your cabin for the mischief of the hour, if it so hap." We know that the passengers have got no authority over the elements, despite their exalted positions, and the ship is eventually stranded on an island. Initially, we, the audience, don't realize that this is not a usual storm. We shall learn in the next scene that the Tempest was created by Prospero, using the spirit Ariel to do his work. It's important to remember that the entire play takes place on a wooden open-air stage. This diagram shows how this first scene, the storm scene, might have been staged at the Globe Theatre, and indicates that the Elizabethan stage was far better designed than most modern playhouses to portray the action in realistic terms. You'd have an actor positioned on the rails of the music gallery, representing a sailor on the masthead. There would be a stagehand above him in the huts who would produce the sound of the thunder. On the terrace would stand the master of the ship, as though on the bridge of his vessel. On the main platform, you would have the boatswain and the crew, as though on the main deck of the ship. And from the trapdoor would come the passengers, as though from their quarters below deck. Shakespeare has been justly praised for the realism and accuracy of this first scene. His detailed knowledge of nautical matters is apparent throughout, and in the boatswain's speeches, which you'll find in lines 5 to 7 and lines 27 and 28, Shakespeare shows himself thoroughly familiar with the standard procedure laid down for handling a ship in such conditions. It's unlikely that Shakespeare had first-hand experience of the sea, but he may have read contemporary instruction manuals for sailors, and he must have heard many seafaring tales in the taverns of South London on the banks of the Thames, where actors and seamen would have freely mingled. London is, and was, a major seaport. This picture shows London round about the time of Shakespeare, with the Tower of London in the background. These are sights that Shakespeare, the actors, and the audiences would have known very well. Right then, here's a potted summary of the first scene. The play opens with a storm at sea. A sailing ship is battling against the element. The ship is carrying Alonso, the King of Naples, Sebastian, his brother, Ferdinand, his son, Antonio, the Duke of Milan, but we'll learn that he became Duke by nefarious means, Gonzalo, a loyal and wise servant who used to work for the original Duke of Milan, Prospero, but now he works for Prospero's brother, Antonio. The two comic characters, Trinculo and Stefano, who spend much of their time drunk and rowdy. And in spite of the best efforts of the crew, it appears that the ship is unable to be saved, and the scene ends with the audience imagining that a shipwreck will follow. Or, in the simplest of terms, Prospero conjures up a storm in order to shipwreck his enemies. To recap, as part of the exposition, some of the characters have been introduced, and there is certainly some conflict. We are not yet sure who the protagonist and antagonists are. That will be made clear in the second scene of Act 1. In terms of themes, there's not much detail in the first scene. The passengers and crew aboard the foundering ship will certainly think that death is a possibility, but the scene is too short for this to develop in any meaningful way. There is certainly a struggle between the passengers and the crew. In particular, the boatswain, who is the voice of authority on the vessel, and this leads to a sense of increasing disorder on board the ship. Obviously, these characters are on a voyage, sailing somewhere on a journey of discovery, literally. And the conversation between the boatswain and the passengers does make the audience consider who's in charge. It's not the king and the fake duke. They do not have the expertise to keep the vessel safe. They have to take a position of subordination as the boatswain and the crew take charge. In another way, you could say that the theme of class and class roles is introduced here. You should start your notes on the key motifs and symbols that you find in the play, such as the very obvious ones of the sea, ships, and water in the first scene. In Shakespeare's plays, storms are always symbolic. What do you think this tempest symbolizes? Always be on the lookout for key quotes that you can use when writing an essay. Like this one by the boatswain to Gonzalo. He says that he will be patient when the sea is patient. He points out that the sea has no respect for any titles. It makes no difference who's on the ship, a king or a peasant. The sea, the storm, the tempest will continue in its fury no matter what men try and do. The boatswain advises Gonzalo and the others to go to their cabins and to be quiet, as they are of no help to the crew. As you consider the text, ask yourself why this scene is an effective opening to the play. The next video will be for Act 1, Scene 2, a rather long scene which will provide much of the background information that is needed to understand the plot. You are encouraged to share these video lessons with all teachers and students of this play. If we wish education in South Africa to succeed, then we have to make resources available to all who need them free of charge. Please join me in making your own resources available to as many scholars and teachers as possible. Should you have any queries, please contact me on the email address that you see on the screen.